Welcome to the Earthworks Podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon from many of our turf friends from the past 30 years.
Hi, everybody. This is Kevin Hicks with Earthworks, bringing another what could be a very interesting talk with Mr. Chuck Barber from St. Charles Country Club in St. Charles, Illinois. We'll get into some housekeeping that I try to do at the front end. Most of you probably know who Chuck is, but for those of you that don't, welcome, Chuck. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So for the record, Chuck texted me this morning and asked if he was allowed to swear on the podcast. So this could be really interesting. I think it'll be fun.
Potty mouth is a problem I've suffered with my entire life.
I said maybe not Joe Rogan level, but like PG-13 sort of thing. So it'll be fun. So St. Charles, tell me and tell those that are listening the story of St. Charles. How long you've been there? Some of this stuff I don't know.
Okay, sure. So I've worked at St. Charles Country Club. It'll be 10 years next week. On Monday, it'll be my 10th anniversary. And I live in probably the most further westernmost suburb that could still be considered suburban Chicago. We're about 40 plus miles west of downtown Chicago.
Okay.
And if you go just a little bit to the west, you're in cornfields almost all the way to Iowa.
Right.
After you get past St. Charles and Geneva, where I live. I've been here 10 years. I was at a place called Indian Lakes Resort, which was a hotel and 27-hole golf course prior to that. It's now defunct. The hotel golf course, all of it has been shuttered in the last several years. Prior to that, I was an assistant superintendent locally at Butler National Golf Club and Beverly Country Club. And I've lived in Chicago market since the late 90s, in between colleges. I started college at Clemson University in South Carolina, and I wasn't much of a student. I had more fun, I guess, than
that sounds familiar. Yeah.
In class. And when I decided I wanted to sober up and finish my degree, I transferred to the University of Illinois and I finished my degree there.
Okay. So did you go to Clemson originally for turf or just for drinking?
Well, it wasn't for turf originally.
Okay.
But it also wasn't for drinking. That wasn't my stated goal was not to drink my way out of Clemson, but that's kind of what happened.
Right.
I was actually going to be a high school history teacher.
Okay.
And I studied for 2.5 years to do just that. I went through the full course curriculum to that point, and then I got in the classroom in the spring semester of my junior year, that January semester at Clemson. I went into the classroom and just to audit a high school history class at Daniel High School, famous because of the home of Pete Maravich and his dad Press. They were
okay.
The stars of Daniel High School back in the late 50s, early 60s, probably. But I quit that day. I went to my advisor and says, "You got to get me out of this. I want nothing to do with this." I was in a building filled with children that were just like me, and I saw what type of nightmare lay ahead. So I quit that day. And as luck would have it, I was working at the Walker course at Clemson University, and the superintendent there at the time was a guy called John Lloyd, who I believe still works there locally. I'm not sure exactly where John's at, but John Lloyd said, you've got an affinity for this. And I had worked on golf course grounds crews for 3 or 4 years to that point, and I kind of blew it off. I said, "There's no way you can make a living doing this. This can't be your only job." And he said, "Look around you. This is my job. This is my life, my livelihood."
Right. It's my office.
Yeah. I transferred into the turf program there at Clemson, but I wasn't very disciplined about my lifestyle habits and marrying that with my education. So I quit school and I lived in Colorado in Vail, and I worked at the Cordillera Valley Club.
Okay.
Whatever. The Cordillera is the name of the place, and they've got, I think, 5 courses now, but I was there at the Valley course.
Gotcha.
I worked there, and then when it was time to get done with my high altitude training, I moved back to Chicago where my parents had relocated, and got a job at Butler National and finished my schooling at that time.
So are you an Illinois native or just happened to settle there?
No, I moved around rather a lot in my youth. I lived in Massachusetts until 3rd grade. And I grew up a basketball fan. My dad played basketball in high school and college, and we watched the Celtics together. That was how we connected initially with my dad, was watching, Larry Bird and
Sure.
Chief and DJ, Danny Ainge, and I think Bill Walton there towards the end. But I lived there until I was in third grade. Then we moved to Western Pennsylvania, and that's where I tell people I'm sort of from. I graduated high school at a place called Butler High School, about an hour north of Pittsburgh.
Yep.
I grew up a Steelers fan, Pens, Pirates. Not going so well in the sports world. I'm being, but that's fun. I've got, Super Bowls in my living memory and Stanley Cups, even decent runs at the pennant for the Bucks when I was in high school. We had really good Pirates teams when I was a young man, when I lived in Western Pennsylvania, but I left there in 1994. So it's been a long time. I've lived in Chicagoland longer than I've lived anywhere else the last 22 years.
Right. Well, it sounds familiar. I grew up in Minneapolis area, and I've actually lived in Idaho longer than anywhere else, which is kind of.
You tell people you're from Minnesota, or what do you say? I'm from Idaho now?
I say I'm from Minnesota, which is a nice place to be from. Once you've you spend some time in Colorado, once you've tasted the Western weather and lifestyle, it's pretty hard to go back.
Yeah, I agree.
It's home, and we've raised our 3 kids here, and I love it out here. So,
well, 2 of them are off the payroll full time now, right?
2 of them are off the payroll, although they're kind of kicking and screaming on some of the insurance things and things like that. But now, once you put a ring on a girl's finger, it's
right.
Yeah, our responsibilities are over, except later on when the grandkids come, I guess. Later.
I don't get the feeling I'll ever be done being a parent.
Absolutely not.
I've been married 17, it'll be 18 years in March. We have 3 kids, 13 down to 7. And it's kind of hard to see the future, right? But I don't know that, I'm 45, my dad's 78, my mom is 76. They're still my parents, and I think they probably worry about me every day of their lives.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing to me. Our youngest is 15, almost 16. And it's amazing that 15 to 20 year old cycle where not only are you the dumbest person on planet Earth, but you're certainly not a parent or a friend at that point. You're just somebody that's in the way. But it's amazing once that, and it varies, with individual kids. But for us, it was about 20 where things turned the corner, and they realized, gosh, he might not have been as dumb as I thought he was. He's seen some things. So that's been rewarding.
I remember thinking that about my dad. When I was a kid, he had a briefcase, and the briefcase handle broke, where you could just carry it. The handle broke. He just didn't buy himself a new briefcase, and he carried it under his arm. And I kept asking, Dad, just get yourself a new briefcase. And it didn't occur to me until I had kids of my own and bills to pay that he probably just didn't want to spend the money on that.
There was a reason he wasn't.
There was a reason he didn't do it. And I harassed him for it for years. It wasn't just like a one. And I probably, if I'd have thought about it long enough, I would have just bought him a new one for Christmas instead of the garbage I wound up buying him on my own.
Exactly.
So, there is a certain amount of wisdom that you gain in hindsight from your own experience.
Yep.
As all things life, turf, whatever, that if you're paying attention, you'll get there.
Yeah, no question. Okay, so you already covered some stuff. We covered school and family, and you've been married, you said 17 years. For a recovering Midwesterner, talk about refresh my memory on weather and pests and things like that you deal with. There was a lot of chatter about army worms this summer, and obviously you guys deal with dollar spot. What are your challenges there, turf wise?
That's a good question. They seem to be evolving pretty rapidly.
Mm-hmm.
Our challenges today aren't what they were 15 years ago anyway, maybe 16 or 17 years ago, or maybe I'm just paying more attention now. We didn't get the army worm problem that a lot of people did in the Midwest. That may have been luck of the draw. We treated Greenstein fairways with grub control and cutworm control measures that may have prevented injury on shortcut grass, but not anything in the rough.
Is that something you normally would treat for?
So we have, you asked a little bit about St. Charles Country Club. This might be a way to introduce some of the interesting parts of it. Is The club is on not quite 300 acres over 24 holes, built in several different decades over different construction methods.
Right.
I've referred to it affectionately as Time Travel Country Club. Well, yeah, I mean, because it was built in the 20s, 1924, the club opened, and they relocated about half of the golf course in 1985. So the former Arthur Andersen consulting firm wanted to build their corporate training and hospitality campus on St. Charles Country Club property.
Okay.
So they did a land swap with the club, and they shifted from the west side of Highway 25 to the north side of Country Club Road, and that's what divides the property. So we have two tunnels that we go through to get to different parts of the golf course. So half the golf course was built in the 20s on push-up greens, modified with top dressing over the course of several decades. And then they relocated and built, half the golf course with USGA greens and completely different architectural features as far as scale. Greens are bigger, bunkers were bigger, tees were bigger. It was the height of 1985 architecture, right, which nobody's, remembering as the golden age of architecture.
I haven't found anybody that says that.
Maybe there's maybe some fantastic golf courses I'm not aware of that were built in the 1980s that remain intact today.
Sure.
I'm sure they've been heavily modified.
So how you said 24 holes?
Yeah. So in 2005, the club used land that one of the members had gifted the club several years before, I think in the early 80s. One of our members wanted to develop a part of St. Charles, and to do that, he had to get utilities to the development. And the only way to do that was to surrender the land, deeded open space, forever. So he deeded it to St. Charles Country Club in order to get water, power, sewer, everything to what would become a development just north of the property. So in 2005 and 6, the club decided that they were going to develop that as sort of a 6-hole preview course that would involve then restoring the entire 18-hole course to mimic or mirror those 6 holes. The catch to that was they were going to have to sell off property on the south side of the very far south side of the oldest portion of the club to development. So they built those 6 holes and then unveiled the plan to finance the rest of the construction of the golf course to that effect, as having condominiums and houses on it. And the plan, I think, was shot down pretty quickly. It was in 2007, I think, is when all that happened. And then the economic collapse, 2008, 9, 10 came through. And I want to say something in the order of 50% of the equity membership left in about 10 months. Yeah, they were thinking.
So mostly corporate members and
a lot of people were very upset with the direction, I think, that the club was taking towards selling land and developing it for condominiums and other stuff that was going to drastically change the face of the club and its future.
Yeah.
I think there was some corporate portion of it, certainly, but then job loss and home loss and all those other things, we weren't immune to that this far afield either. With all the wealth in the area, it's not very dense wealth. The lots here are big. It's not like it is when you get further east into Cook County.
Right. But you're close enough to the metro that you're going to feel the effects of it for sure.
And complicating that even further is the 6 holes that they built, very well built, interesting design, just extremely difficult to play. A lot of forced carries, significant elevation changes, even by, flatland Midwest standards. There's bunkers on those 6 holes that are 30 plus feet below the green banks.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it's very severe, and photos don't capture it well. They call it the quarry course, and it was developed in a former working sand and gravel quarry.
Okay.
And there's a few of those out there in the world. I know there's one in Florida. I think it's called Black Diamond Ranch, if memory serves, and it may be even called the Quarry. I can't remember. But quarry courses are not famous for their ease of use. Victoria National, I think, is built out of an old quarry.
Well, Stream Song is kind of a quarry. I mean, it's
I've played Stream Song. That's a different animal. The scale there is magnificently wide fairways and bunker and all these other things. This is classic Midwestern architecture inside a quarry with, decent fairway corridors, but extremely challenging topography. And it was a challenge for our members to enjoy it. So,
are those 6 then a separate experience?
Yeah, they're not in the rotation. They're not in the routing.
So does it get a lot of use?
No. I can't think of any other way to say it. No.
Okay. Yeah. Curious. I mean, because it would be a quick loop.
Yeah, no,
So
it's not. It's not a quick loop because of the degree of difficulty.
Sure.
There's the forced carries, and if you do miss the fairway, you're in a bunker that's going to take you 1 to 4 shots to either recover from or get out of. Split fairways and a lot of other things that make it very challenging for anybody but the best golfers to really enjoy it.
Yeah.
And not to bemoan the architects or architecture, it's just not it doesn't have in any way reflective of the rest of our golf course.
Right.
It's so different that it can't even be considered a part of St. Charles Country Club. That's why it's got its own designation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
But it just happens to work out of the same maintenance facility.
Right. And the biggest challenge for us there is they added, I think, I never went and counted it all up, but they added almost as many sprinklers on those 6 holes as we have on the other 18 because it was built in 2005, sure. Which with much better distribution pattern and tighter spacing and more, it's almost full 5-row system to cover wall to wall on those 6 holes. But they never added any pump capacity or storage capacity. So we pump water out of the same, 110 pound, 1,200 gallon a minute, 60 horsepower motors for those 6 holes as we do for everything else. And that's a big challenge on the infrastructure side.
Sure.
They built actually a wet well and pad to develop a pump station there, including getting 480 volt power all the way to it, but they just never developed a pump system for it. So to water those 6 holes is 400 gallons a minute. Takes an awful long time.
Yeah. I'll bet.
It's as much flow as we can get.
Interesting. Huh. So did we answer the question about pests?
No, I really went way off the deep end there.
Yeah.
So pests, largely, we spend more money on dollar spot than anybody in North America. Our fairways are highly susceptible, and we have 40 acres of fairway over 24 holes.
And the makeup of those?
Name it? Well, yeah. Those quarry holes are almost 100% clean bent grass.
Okay.
And that's actually one of the advantages of not being able to water as much as you might want to keep it green.
Right.
I routinely let those holes go dormant through the summer months. Annual bluegrass doesn't get a foothold. Bent grass that's there proliferates. And they go brown, but the minute it rains, they turn green again. And there is hardly any annual bluegrass on those fairways.
Cool.
That a lot of that has to do with limited disruption and limited cart traffic and limited play.
Right.
But dollar spot, they'll get dollar spot a little bit on those 6 holes. It's a newer variety, a seed research variety, and I can't remember which one, 10, 19, 10, 20. There's so many. Mm-hmm. Our older fairways are Penn Eagle from the 80s, and the oldest fairways are largely annual bluegrass. They're, 80, 90 something years old, coming up on 100 years here soon, and heavy cart traffic, heavy soils, and a lot of annual bluegrass. But it doesn't seem to be anything other than dollar spot. And if we really get washed out in the summer months, we'll see Pythium around the drains, intermediate rough. But we tank mix phosphites all summer long at pretty low rates, and that seems to keep it at bay.
As long as you're on that program, it's pretty effective.
Yeah, it's cheap. It's too cheap not to do, in my estimation. Even if you don't think you're going to get it, you want to sleep at night, right? So I look at it.
Yeah.
Insect pests, we deal with white grubs are our main insect pests. And if you leave it untreated on greens, you'll get cutworms, but it's pretty cheap and easy to do that too.
Sure.
And, broadleaf weeds, like anybody else on heavy soils, when in shade, you'll get little plantain, clover, dandelions. We don't really battle sedges or crabgrass all that much, but we do treat for it routinely, yearly. Mm-hmm. So the weed pressure is not super high, but if you let it go for more than a year, wall to wall, treating rough, then you get burned. So we just do it every fall. Typically we would treat, we always wind up doing it in the spring if we're doing projects or something like that. And I hate doing the spring. It just takes too much time and the controls.
Yeah. Weather's never really conducive. How about labor? How's labor?
Have you met one of us in the superintendent world that doesn't have a labor problem?
I ask everyone just in the hopes that maybe somebody will say, "Hey, labor's been great."
Yeah,
haven't bumped across too many of them.
But so the good news is the people that I have are very good people, and they're great to work with, and they want to do well.
Yeah.
And if they bring someone in They ask if I need more people. The answer to that question is 100% of the time, yes. Doesn't matter what time of year it is. And maybe 2 out of 10 people that'll come in will stay. We have a decent retention rate after the first year. We don't have a lot of rookies on staff year over year. And we have a lot of people that have been here 5 to 10 plus, all the way up to 40. We have a guy in the crew that's been 40 years. Yeah. But no, labor is a challenge, just like everybody else. We're far from the city, and it's just the labor market is rough everywhere, and we're no different.
Yeah, far enough from the city that's not a draw for
right. Yeah. Some of my colleagues closer to the city may be able to attract people more quickly, but I don't think their retention is any higher.
Yeah, no, and that's a key function that a lot of the decision makers don't really factor in, is the retention and the cost of turnover.
Right.
I talked to a former assistant, not in California, believe it or not, who just bumped his starting wage to $20 an hour.
I believe it. Yeah.
And I asked him if it was effective, and he said, "We'll see."
Yeah.
$20 an hour.
Right. Well,
interesting.
We're going to get everybody that's been here more than a couple of years that isn't at 15 up to 15, and everybody that's at 15 or higher is going to get bumped up.
Yeah.
It's sort of the average rate of that bump.
Right.
So that's just the way it's got to go. And I think the clubhouse operations people, dining, food outlets, that kind of thing, they're going to be starting everybody at 15 to 16. So we can't allow our staff to fall behind that.
Right.
And hopefully 15, 16, 17 will get people through the door. I'm not convinced that's true. I don't know that 20 is the right answer either, honestly, because so much of our work is highly seasonal through so many golf courses in America. I don't have the parking to have 15 people here all winter long, because that's where we put the snow. There's nowhere to park.
Right.
So it's a real challenge. It's a real challenge, and I honestly don't know what the answer is. One of my college classmates, who's going to be in the Hall of Fame for golf course superintendent someday, is a guy called Connor Healy at Conway Farms. He's one of the smartest people I know, and he's a fantastic person and a great golf course superintendent. And he got his MBA from DePaul some years back, and he knows more about this. If you want to talk to somebody who knows about labor and labor markets and the business end of the business, call Connor Healy. He's as smart as a whip. There's only 2 solutions, and you pay people more, or you invest in technology to reduce the amount of labor that you need. That's really the only 2 solutions.
Right.
And, it's not a coincidence that companies are working on robot motors.
All right. Well, gosh, you're so good at these segues, Chuck. I got to give you credit, man. Although you did skip 2 bullets, but let's talk about that.
What are the 2 points?
Great innovations and paradigm shifts in how you manage your turf. What are they? I love the answer. I love hearing the answers to this question.
Paradigm shifts in managing turf,
and innovations that have
we're using the same mowers from 150 years ago. We just have hydraulics and diesel now. I mean,
but there's something that's changed that's made your life better, different, whatever.
I don't know. None of these innovations have made my life better. I shouldn't say that.
More efficient with either time or product.
So
I know one.
Trey Rogers, right?
Sure.
He's at Michigan State.
Yeah.
Every time I hear him talk, he say there are no new ideas, just new technologies adapted to old ideas.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
So the thing that's been the most impactful for us at St. Charles Country Club, at least, is GPS on the sprayers. And I'm sure you knew this, which is why you asked.
Yeah.
But we have 2 sprayers, 2 300-gallon sprayers with GPS systems. One of them has the stored maps RTK system. One of them does not, because the technology was not as good at the time. When I bought it in 2013, I think was when we bought that rig.
Well, you were an early adopter.
Well, it was cheap.
Right.
And I have a lot of ground to cover.
Right.
We spray 175 acres of rough for weeds every year. We got to get done fast. We got more rough than people have golf course in this market.
Do you find that you've saved more time or product in that
both.
adaptation? Both.
Yeah.
See, for us in the West, because we don't rely so heavily on pesticides, it's definitely a labor saver. Definitely.
Sure. Right.
But materials as well. I mean, we're not investing as much in the materials. Might be more fertility.
I mean, I guess if it's dry all the time, your need to go out and spray Daconil goes down considerably.
Yeah.
You still need to spray urea or ammonium sulfate or for weeds or something like that.
Right.
And wetting agents, certainly you got to get out,
Yep.
into the developers. I get all that.
Yeah.
But for us, we have goofy line fairways, and if you have one or two boom sections blowing off into the rough, we were able to get, I want to say we eliminated 5 acres out of 45 acres that we were spraying. So we went from 45 or 47 and a half to 40 in the flick of a switch.
I think the folks that haven't experienced it don't realize how much you can really dial down,
Right.
or dial in.
Right.
That acre sprayed. It's pretty amazing, and the accuracy and the repeatability. You mentioned RTK. When we made that upgrade, the repeatability of that. If you're on a growth regulator program on fairways, it's astounding how accurate it is.
Well, right. I mean, so for me, if I want to go out and spray the rough, it's going to take me myself 2 weeks or so to do it. I don't have an assistant right now. I'm in the process of hiring a new assistant, and we can talk more about that if you like. But when I get done spraying one day, I just hit a button on the map. It picks right back up where I left off on
Right.
where the skips and overlaps.
Yeah.
And that's worth the price of.
For sure. Even if you have to go to a meeting or go to lunch or something, it's worth it.
Yeah. It rains. It happens.
Right.
Yeah. You're not going to be able to spray 175 acres in one day, and the foam does not last.
Right. It's a good point.
Right.
We need to come up with a better foamer. That's really the bottom line, right? No.
26 grand, I think, is what we paid. 26 grand.
What's the payoff for you? A year?
Well,
you did.
Well,
so you did a retrofit, or you did?
No, we bought it not purpose built. That's not the right way of saying that. We bought a Toro rig.
Okay.
With a third party operators. Agfinity, I think is the name of the company. Sam Schmidt was the installer. Okay. Great guy at Above Par Tech. Sam, I'm sorry. So you're not going to get the cost of the rig back. You have to buy the machine.
Correct.
But you'll get the price point of the GPS unit back in a year, maybe 2.
Yeah.
Now, different for us is we already had one of those machines, so our budget was already built upon, the reduced savings. Right. So that how you cost that, I don't know. Ask Connor; he'd be able to tell you.
Okay.
But certainly, being able to spray fairways at 10 miles an hour, we can. When we had 2 sprayers going on 40 acres of fairway, we could be done in 4 hours.
That's the game changer, is the ground speed. Unbelievable.
Right.
And if you hadn't experienced it, to think that you could spray at that speed or even 7 or 8 miles an hour you just wouldn't believe it unless you see it. Yeah.
And the way I look at it, it's right for all the right reasons, because it eliminates off-target application, right? So environmentally and fiscally, right there, you're saving money and you're saving the environment if that's your stated goal.
Right.
It saves time, which is money.
Yep.
It's labor. It saves you all those things.
Labor is the biggest line item. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You made a post recently that made me smile. A lot of your posts make me smile, but on Twitter, that your 4th green was not going to be your Waterloo. Being a history buff, I could see why you use that reference. But
the reference.
So my bigger question is, why does every course have a 4th green Waterloo?
Because it's a dynamic environment that's got, at least in this market, it's got weird weather and trees. So there's, and who knows, the way somebody built something, it wasn't right. That's what wound up happening there. So the bad news was the 4th green wasn't built well initially, and we rebuilt it, and it was also rebuilt poorly, which I blame myself for not keeping a closer eye on that at construction. But at the time, we were doing a full-scale bunker renovation, and our installer, the construction outfit, who was great, I stand behind their work and everything they did. It was not a traditionally built green. We didn't build a USGA green that I'm sure wouldn't have suffered that problem, although it might not have been, the upside wouldn't have been good into the future, in my estimation. I took my eye off of it at the wrong time, and we wound up with a bit of a layer. And at the end, it's me who's going to pay for the price for that. If it is my water, it's not going to be the company that built it.
Yeah.
So why does every course have it? Because these are dynamic changing environments with human error and, the fates conspiring against you in any number of ways.
Yeah.
And nothing ever reacts the same anyway.
And in the case of your number 4, my number 4 at my last golf course was also my Waterloo.
Really? Number 4?
And it happened to be number 4. In fact, anybody that had ever spent any time there would always ask me, "How's number 4 doing?" Well, how do you think it's doing? It's struggling. But in your case, it's shade primarily, right?
Well, no, that was just a construction problem.
Okay.
That has, I shouldn't say it's been rectified, but it's on the path to being rectified, and it is far and away from the worst root zone that anybody's ever going to see.
Yeah.
There's so much, so many different root zones that are worse than the one that's built on. I was unaware or ignorant of the scope of the problem, because it was a new green that struggled in its first year in 2020 because we had so many rounds and so much traffic, right? We opened it and it just got, 50% more play than it normally would have in any other year.
Sure.
All right, it's going to be a little thin, but it was fine. And then July 4th of the second year, it had been bulletproof. Up until that point, we got hot, we got wet, and I didn't understand the severity of the problem. And by the time I realized what was happening, it was too late, and it got real thin. It's fine now. It recovered. We babied it for the rest of the summer. We took the triplex off. We took the heavy growth regulators off. We added a hair more fertility, but we watched the growth to make sure it wasn't going out of control. We skipped rolling the whole green. We just rolled around the flag, that kind of thing. And it responded to treatment as new creeping bentgrass greens can do. They're extremely good at overcoming the way you idiots like me ding them up.
Right. There is some room for error on that for sure.
Right. For sure.
I had a train of thought, but it's gone now.
Do you think there are a lot of people Googled Waterloo after they read that post and thought, "Oh, okay, yeah"?
I would think so. Yeah, I would think so. And that's your history background, isn't it?
Right.
Was it American history that drew you to that field first?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think what drew me to golf course management was the people in it, and that was the same with history. I had a strong affinity for the teachers that I had in history classes as a young man and in my misspent youth. So I kind of wanted to emulate them. They were interesting people that seemed to know a lot about things. Mm-hmm. And I have, to borrow a phrase from one of our colleagues, I've been sort of passionately curious about stuff my whole life. And I'm an avid reader, and I get into a subject and all of a sudden I'm extremely passionate about that one thing. And when I was a kid, it was history. Even like golf history, I used to love golf history stats about, where the US Open was played, who won, who won that tournament, where it was played, that kind of thing. I was really drawn to that at the same time I was drawn to the game of golf when I was 11 or 12 years old.
Yeah. You make references a lot of times on your social media pages about architecture or areas. And, that's why I was curious what your background was and where you'd been, because you seem to know some stuff about the Northeast and some of the South. And so, but knowing that your interest is history, that makes a lot of sense.
So my sister's a lot smarter than me. She went to Harvard. She's got a PhD, and she took me down that path of being just curious about stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure this has happened to you. It's probably happened to a lot of your listeners, is when you get passionate or curious about one thing, you'll learn more about a different subject within that one thing, and you go down rabbit holes like crazy. If you're not careful, it can consume you.
Yeah. So for the record, I usually share my my list of questions with the folks that I have on. I did not share, but again, you did a masterful job of segueing. So one of my questions was, what do you read? What are you reading these days?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because this came up in a Twitter post the other day that we can address if you like. So I'm reading a book by I think he's a doctor, Michael Sandel is his name. He's a professor at Harvard. Okay. And he wrote a book it's called The Tyranny of Merit, and the illusion of upward mobility and the way meritocracy has demeaned the value of work or uneducated people in America. Mm-hmm. And the reason I tied it back in, and I thought about this long and hard when I was reading this book, somebody at St. Charles Country Club played out a bunker on the 10th hole, a gorgeous fall day and a busy afternoon. And they walked up, hit their shot and walked back out. And they had, I think, literally, I hate the word literally, but I think they literally had to walk over the bunker rate to hit the shot.
Mhm.
And what that got me to thinking about was a passage in that book about uh, the way our elected officials, who couldn't possibly represent the bulk of Americans because none of them ever worked a day job in their lives,
Right.
have, thanks to globalization and their technocratic, meritocratic thinking, fully demeaned the value of work. So the person who did that conceivably wasn't thinking this in depth about it, but it's what occurred to me was this person didn't value the work that it went into building that bunker, string trim in the face, edging it, raking it, and preparing it for play.
Yeah.
If they didn't think about it, that's fine. I can handle ignorance a little bit more than just actively not caring.
Yeah.
Which I think is like, to acknowledge it and not care is different than just hitting a shot and not care.
Well, and if you look at our current education system, whether it's post-secondary or however things are set up, I mean, the theory or the notion of a blue collar career is frowned upon. And look what the trades, look at the result that it's borne out in the trade industry. I mean, I've told my kids, my two older boys, I suggested you get a CDL just as a fallback. How would a CDL be paying you right now? or any of these things. I mean, I've got distributors that can't find a driver for $75 an hour. It's pretty, those are bigger markets, but the point is, and I have a ton of respect for what Mike Rowe has been doing for a number of years and really trying to highlight or glorify the trades and the opportunities that are there. I mean, in a large part, we're kind of part of that trade industry.
Oh, nobody will ever confuse me for a tradesman. I am not skilled at anything to that effect. I'm really not. I'm not handy. I can fix irrigation wiring. That's where it ends. Everything else, I'm calling an electrician. I can fix irrigation in the field. Everything else in my house, I'm calling a plumber. I can repair the benches and ball washers, the benches and shit like that, stuff like that. Maybe.
That's still PG-13. We're fine. We're good.
Right. Yeah. But I have learned a lot over the years from people that I've worked with, worked for, and been around to be at least competent enough. I know your woodworking is incredible. So you're on a different level than me, and probably a different level than most people in America in your ability. So don't confuse me for anybody in the trades, but I will tell you that 4-year education that took me 6 years was not for me. I hated school when I was in it at every level, except for the odd class through high school. I hated it. I hated being there. I didn't like spending time there. I liked working. Yeah. My first job was at a car wash when I was 13. I had a paper route. I mowed lawns I didn't mow lawns. I mowed my parents' lawn. I still complained about that ceaselessly. But I always had something to do when I wasn't playing golf or, wasting time with my friends. And I should have pursued something to that effect. Or at most, I should have gone to a Rutgers-style 2-year certificate program.
Right.
Gotten into the field faster. The education that I received was wholly unnecessary for, I believe, our careers. I think the people that have gone the 2-year school route, wherever it is, at any level, at the junior college, all the way up to the Penn State, Michigan State, Rutgers programs, they've done that. I think that's the absolute correct move for golf course management, because how much did you rely on your education in the field?
Right.
I mean, it's as near zero as makes no difference.
Well, and in the time I've been in the industry, it's gone from.
I hope Bruce Branham doesn't listen to this.
And I'm sure you learned some stuff from Bruce too. But in the time I've been in the industry, it's gone from, get your 2-year degree, get in, get out, assuming there's already been some experience, to in the late 90s through the 2000s. I'm not going to look at anybody that doesn't have a 4-year degree, which I always thought was wrong. And now I think we're coming right back to the start again, because there's such a need that the shorter courses, I think, are going to be more than adequate, and they are more than adequate.
If I'm hiring, I don't want to talk too much about replacing an assistant superintendent, but of the candidates that I had, only one of them had a degree in turf or a certificate in turf out of the 4 that I got. I think, and I was happy with 4 candidates to respond to my job posting.
Yeah, darn right.
Very happy with that. So I think all of us in golf course management need to get on board with the fact that the person that you're going to hire as an assistant superintendent or a golf course superintendent, maybe not today, but certainly into the future, won't have a background or an education in turf.
Well, I think that's why the shift has been so strong in the last few years to identifying, quality team players on your staff and trying to build them up from within. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that.
And that's another strategy that we're going to take. We're hoping to hire an assistant soon, and we're also going to ensure that the people on our team that are capable of additional responsibility and the additional salary that goes with it. You don't get more money just because you exist. You get more money because you take on more responsibility.
You have value. You have greater value.
Right. The people that want that and are capable of it will be trained to the level that they, the sky's the limit, wherever they can get to.
Good for you. Good for you.
Oh, we're not there yet. We've done.
But it's. I think it's the right direction, and it always has been the right direction. We just kind of forgot about it because we were in a land of plenty for a while.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I've encouraged my own kids, 13, 11-year-old kids, take a strong look at the U.S. military for continuing education if that's the way you want to go. If you want a 4-year degree, you better be pursuing a degree in mechanical engineering. You want to be a medical doctor of some kind. I'm not paying English degrees.
A level of specificity, I think, with a 4-year degree is key.
Right. But I tell my kids all the time, if you can get a job that pays well without having to incur hundreds of thousands or at least tens of thousands of dollars in debt, and that's a better way to go. And the world needs more people like that than needs philosophy majors.
Yep, I agree. So, okay, speaking of philosophy, dang, you're good. I think you can interview me next time. Speaking of philosophy, we're going to get into this, but here's a philosophical question. Are you more or less likely to try new things the longer you're in this business?
More, I think.
Okay, good.
Because I'm fully aware of how little I know about everything. The more you know.
Is that an epiphany that's come on recently or as you get older?
I don't know how recently it came to me, but I just, it maybe just comes with age and wisdom. I'm not an especially wise person, but I'm wise enough to know my limitations and my ignorances. Sure. And if trying something new enlightens me about something I didn't know before, and it can be an objective improvement, or it can save us time, there's so many different criteria to use, but generally they fall upon, is it an improvement? Is it safe? Is it cost effective? Right.
And where do you get those inputs? Where are those inputs obtained? Staff members?
Yeah, right. I mean, from distributors, you know what I mean? From the people that sell machines, the people that sell processes, the people that sell products, whatever. There's nobody you can't learn from.
Whoever's got an innovation, you're willing to listen to it. Yeah.
Right. It's got to pass sort of the smell test.
Right.
And if it's objectively an improvement.
That wasn't a shot at Earthworks products, was it? It's passed the smell test. Okay.
Well, Steve 3 doesn't pass the smell test, I can promise you that. But it's the smell of victory, I'm told.
It is the smell of victory. Absolutely. Well, that's interesting. And I find myself as I travel around, I celebrate the guys that are in the twilight of their careers who are still learning every day. And I think it's so inspiring to see those guys in their 60s that are, getting after it every day. They're excited. I mean, there's plenty that aren't, and they are not inspiring to me, but boy, there's a lot that still are they're eagerly learning. And I've got a customer down in Northern California that he told me last week that he's 69 years old. He's almost 70, and he's still getting after it. And one of the sharpest guys I know. And it's just, I love that stuff.
I think most golf course superintendents are fairly happy being golf course superintendents. It's my guess. Right. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it for as long as we did. How many customers or clients, friends do you have in the business that have done it like I think you and I maybe since we were kids?
Right.
It's really the only job I've ever had.
Yeah, most.
I started working on golf courses when I was 15,
Mm-hmm.
and I haven't missed a summer since. I wouldn't keep doing this if I hated it.
Yeah.
And if you do it this long, and I've been a golf course superintendent for 14 years. 2007 was my first season as superintendent. I still enjoy going to work every day.
Yeah.
And if I am able to make an improvement somehow for my employer and the people I work with, the people I work for, it makes my life easier, any of those things, then yeah, I'll give it a shot.
Right.
And the more shots you take like that, you're going to have a lot more failures. But we don't learn a whole lot from success.
Right.
Edison figured out 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've figured out at least 2 ways not to build a green. Right.
Right.
So I've learned a lot from those failures.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right. So why not try?
And I fear that that's something that's being deprived of the next generation is that that ability to allow failure.
Oh, that hasn't been the case for me. I've failed an awful lot here at St. Charles Country Club. I've banged things up bad.
I mean, the next generation, though, the term helicopter parents comes to mind.
Oh,
where we just don't, because there's no better education than failing.
Yeah.
If you're in the right mindset.
Right. No, that I agree with completely. And that's one of the things that I still struggle with as a parent. I don't understand what happened when other parents my age were kids to now. I don't know what happened because the world is objectively safer. The world is objectively better. Everything is better for us. And we fear the worst things happening to our kids. And they, by and large, never materialize. They're fears that are no founding in reality. And I don't understand why, as an example, the field right by my house where the kids practice soccer and lacrosse, parents will sit there and watch practice.
Right.
Did you watch practices when your kids were young?
Not very often, no. And our parents certainly didn't.
No, I don't know. I'm fairly confident that my own mother wouldn't know where my practices were.
Right.
I mean, I rode my bike or I walked by myself.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, it's acres of parents walking their kids to school. We live less than a mile from school. And it's got to be in the hundreds of parents that walk their kids to school every day. Why on earth are they doing that?
Yeah,
let your kids walk to school with the other kids by themselves. There's an army of police, fire officials, and crossing guards to make sure your kids get the less than a mile to school safely. Mm-hmm. Let them live. They're going to fall down and get hurt. Spoiler alert, kids are pretty resilient. They'll get back up.
Right. But if
you want to talk about a book,
allowed to fall, how do they learn how to deal with that?
Right. If there's a book you want to recommend to your listeners. It's called The Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt. It is a book that every American should read, parent or not. It goes into agonizing detail, the significant downside of helicopter parenting and treating children as if they are fragile, when that is not true at all. They are anti-fragile in every sense of the phrase.
So, as an employer of people, how do you approach that from an employer-employee standpoint?
Just an observation. You look wistfully off into the distance a whole lot when you're asking these questions. Is there something in the room that you stare at specifically, or
no? It's the thin air I'm pulling my questions out of.
Okay, all right. Well, it wasn't written down. Okay. How do I have that same attitude with our team, with the guys on the crew, the people here? I let them bring to me ideas. I let them do the job as long as it meets expectations, the best way that they know how. And I don't drill them down on standard operating procedure because, look, we have like 500 different construction methods and microenvironments and all that. We can't standardize everything here. Yeah. I don't see how any golf course could, unless it was all built exactly at the same time in full sun. You know what I mean? Like how can you standardize? You can standardize a little bit, but this is not a factory floor. And things are going to change from one bunker, one green, one fairway, one tee to the next. So if they've got a better way to mow it, clean it, blow it, trim it, aerate it, whatever, and it keeps the machine, the people in the machine safe, and it doesn't cost us more money or time or energy, then I'm going to let them fail upwards into learning more.
Yeah. I don't think I coined this phrase, but I use it a lot with my employees that, you don't sit on a machine for 8 hours and not come up with a better way to do it.
Yeah.
And so I need to hear about it. But I think that takes a special manager to be able to humble himself enough to realize that, good ideas can come from other than just your own noggin.
I've never had a good idea of my own. I've got good ideas from everybody else, and that's what I love most about Turf Twitter is getting the next idea. Except for whoever it was, I can't remember who it was who had strapped a cup cutter and a backpack blower to the sprayer. And man, God bless you if you're willing to do that. That's just right. I'm going to spray tomorrow. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I'm going to change cups today, and I'm spraying tomorrow. I am maybe I'm just too lazy.
Sometimes I have to check myself when I see those because you don't know. We can't know the backstory.
There's a lot going on with that guy.
Well, and maybe they're addressing membership and trying to communicate a need through membership. Who knows? I
am not making a negative point about that. That is an extremely dedicated, hardworking, innovative superintendent trying to get the job done. Yep. And I'm not. Maybe I'm part of being old. I'm older than that person. Maybe
that could be. Okay, so you jumped one bullet ahead, but one of the things I wanted to ask you about is we've talked about this in the past, but you had a journey into health it's been a couple of years, hasn't it?
2017.
Talk about that. I think it's something that a lot of people in the industry tend to put as a secondary concern, and you really put it in the forefront of your mind, and were very intentional about getting yourself healthy again. Why?
So I was watching the Steelers. I think they were playing the Lions that day. It was the end of October of 2017, and I had finished a taco pizza with my buddy Pete, and we had finished about a case of beer between us during the course of the game. And I weighed something on the order of maybe 270 pounds at the time. I was unhealthy and overweight. I was on my way to, heart disease, diabetes, and obesity, and all these other things. I'm 6'6", so I can make 270 pounds look manageable.
It's still a lot, though.
I can hide a lot of sins under a hooded sweatshirt.
Yeah.
But I thought to myself, I had 3 kids at the time. Like, what kind of example is this? This is Sunday afternoon, and I'm not getting up off the sofa. I'm only holding this down until bedtime. It was, honest to God, it was just that simple. I think it's referred to in other areas of abuse. I was abusing food and alcohol in that moment. Mm-hmm. And it's a moment of clarity. I had this moment where I can't keep doing this. I'm not. This doesn't feel good, and it probably isn't helping, my career any. I want to be an effective golf course superintendent, until I, most likely die.
Until you don't want to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I want it to be my choice. That's a great way of putting it.
So what were the steps?
So I quit drinking immediately and cut out garbage food immediately, and then I started throwing spaghetti at the wall might be a bad way to put that. I started throwing darts at the wall to see, what would be the best target for me to hit. Mm-hmm. And I lit upon, after trying just about every different, not diet, because I was looking for a lifestyle change.
Sure.
I started eating mostly meat and vegetables and eliminating carbohydrates of, anything other than whatever was in a piece of broccoli or asparagus. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of fat in my diet to stay full. And I started doing intermittent fasting, and I really took that off the deep end. I fasted for 2 years to some degree or another at varying intervals, but there was a time for more than 18 months, maybe, or more than a year to 18 months, where I did not take in any calories before 11 in the morning, and I stopped it before 7 o'clock every night. And then once a week, I would fast from dinner Sunday until dinner Monday. And 0 calories.
Wow.
And then once a quarter, I would fast for 72 hours.
How difficult is that with you being in the turf industry? It's an active job.
So I don't want to hand water greens, right? But I still do it. There's all sorts of things that we have to do in our day, on our lives at work and at home that we don't want to do that we
Sure.
have to do. So I had that type of mentality to just, that was what I had to do. Like I'm doing this now. And it becomes easy. My dad was a 3-pack a day smoker for the bulk of his life. I mean, he started smoking when he was 13 or 14. And he smoked a lot, in his younger years. He had a heart scare. This is what I love about my dad. He had a heart palpitation, he had a scare. So he switched from Pall Malls to Salem Lights. That was
Real paradigm shift for him, right?
Right. He wanted to quit smoking when he was in his early 50s. And it wasn't until the time that he wanted to quit smoking. It wasn't having a heart problem that made him want to quit smoking. It was no other external factor. He just knew it was time to quit. So he did. I think people that are addicted to anything, you can be addicted to anything, right?
Right.
And they don't all have to be objectively bad things. Being addicted to alcohol is, I think could be an objectively bad thing, but if you want to quit, you will. But I don't think you can until you want to. I wanted to make that shift. So I was ready for it. It was easy to do.
Do you believe in the concept of having an addictive personality?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So I would surmise then that you probably do not in the case of health, because you just decided one day and it was over.
Yeah. I have, I think at times in my life, certainly when I was at college, actually in high school even, had a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol. And I like beer. I can't shy away from that. I started drinking when I was a very young kid. My first tastes of even, being alcohol, having too much to drink when I was probably 12 or 13 years old.
Wow.
And I drank all the way through high school and college to very damaging effects. I could probably trace every bad thing that ever happened to me in my life back to alcohol. I think I have a better relationship with it now. It certainly isn't an unhealthy one. And more than anything, that's been the most negative thing. I haven't gotten to that point where I just don't want to drink anymore. I think I just developed a better relationship with it.
So you've plugged some of that back in, but just in logical moderation.
I had hash browns at breakfast this morning.
How do you, I want to ask you what your fighting weight is, but how do you approach that? You've got a 13-year-old kid now. How do you approach that knowing that this is kind of where things got off the rails for you or started down that path anyway?
Honesty, nobody ever got anywhere telling lies. So I tell my son exactly what I was up against when I was his age. And I'm very honest about it because I tell him.
And the response?
He doesn't drink. I guess that's a victory. We pay for him to go to see a trainer twice a week. So one of the things that I picked up 3 years ago was lifting weights. You would not know it to look at me, but I lift weights as often as I do because I haven't put on a lot of muscle, but I enjoy going to the gym. I enjoy working out. I'm not terribly strong, but I give all the credit to getting into this style of, eating healthy, just whole food, right?
Sure.
Eat real food. I eat mostly meat and eggs. To my former assistant and friend, Jason Kalstorff, who is a monster weightlifter and a very good human being who taught me about the discipline it takes to be healthy and set that as an example. And he never once preached to me about it. He never once said, "You're fat and stupid and drunk, get your act together." He could have. He absolutely could have, and I would have listened to him because he's as close to family as anybody I have in this area.
Right.
I love him dearly. He took a different position within the area recently, and I miss him a lot. But he could have told me those things. He just showed me by example that, every now and again you can drink, you can eat healthy, you lift weights, you'll take care of yourself, and you'll be better off in the long run. That was absolutely the truth.
Logical.
Yeah. So we just try and set good examples at home. We don't keep junk food in the house. We can't. Our kids devour it instantly.
Right.
So, dinner for us is meat and vegetables. And, on Friday they get pizza. The weekends they might get pancakes. And every now and again we'll, eat a gallon of ice cream in one sitting between the five of us and forget that ever happened. But that's how we handle that at home. We're just honest about it.
Yeah. Good for you. Good for you. So you and I met years ago at TurfNet.
Right.
We'll get back into philosophy here. Is social media, I think the answer is probably yes, but is social media still relevant in the industry, but also in the larger society?
Yeah, I think people manage it badly.
Right.
That's the impression I get, because there's
Both in the industry and out of it.
I'm talking people.
Yeah.
I'm lumping golf course superintendents and turf Twitter in with everybody else in the world, because
Sure.
we are citizens of the world, all of us,
Mhm.
and we should be all kind of lumped in the same box. I think there's all those little buttons about who you can follow and unfollow. You don't have to see these tweets from this person often, see less tweets about this. You can curate your Twitter feed so it doesn't generate contempt. And that's something I learned about in a podcast. Freakonomics is one of my favorites. If you're a podcaster, Freakonomics is awesome.
Yeah.
And they talked about Twitter being a contempt engine. And if you don't curate it carefully, and if you pay attention to sources of media, all media, the news, entertainment, whatever, sports, it will ultimately generate contempt either for, the team you root against or the political party
Right.
you would vote for. All these things, it generates contempt.
Right.
Curate social media so it doesn't do that. And I think you can have a much better experience.
Yeah. Somebody described it as an information funnel. We all choose the funnel, what we funnel through all of the information that's out there. And I thought that was a pretty good way to look at it. I've heard the term echo chamber, and I think we're self-selecting our echo chambers, right? Based on our likes and dislikes. And that's not, there's no healthy discourse anymore.
No, I agree. And
I wrote down, I don't know your politics or lack thereof, and I could care less. We always have rich, productive conversations. We could be on completely different sides of the aisle, and it doesn't really matter. And I think that's something that's been largely lost in our world, is that, I mean, you picked a subject, it's tearing families apart, it's tearing societies and communities apart. And I don't know how we get out of this cycle.
It only tears families and communities apart if you allow it to.
Right.
And if you allow it the way that happens, I think, is if you only have those discussions via social media or other platforms that don't have face-to-face conversation.
Bingo.
Because you'll find you and I could disagree, and I'm willing to bet we do, on a variety of political issues.
Sure.
Socio-political issues that I would argue, generally speaking, have no bearing on either of our lives.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I don't care where you fall on gun control or abortion or the drug control policy, or who gets married. I don't care, because it's got nothing to do with me. Those are social issues,
right,
that have been used since time immemorial by people in elected office to divide the populace, so it takes their eye off of what the official, is doing.
Watch the other hand, right?
Hey, look over here.
Yeah.
Look at this, the shiny thing back here. It's got nothing to do with anything. And before anybody jumps all over me on this, all of my leanings politically trend towards a deep centrist philosophy, and it's generally guided by libertarianism.
Mm-hmm.
I generally think they can make wise decisions on their own without interference. Mm-hmm. And heaven help us if you leave your decision making, you, Kevin Hicks, or anyone else, to elected officials at any level.
I think we can all see how that's going.
We see we're living through the downstream consequences of that right now, and it's not good for anybody.
No, you're right. And I still contend that if you sit, like you said, if you sit two people down in a room together, we could very quickly establish commonality that we would not have seen otherwise. Right. And to be able to hide behind a Twitter moniker or an Instagram profile picture, it's not helping anybody. There's great information to be shared, but at the same time, I think it's as good or as bad as you can make it. Yeah, and who would have thought that we could carry the library of civilization in your hand everywhere, and all it does is generate rage and anger. Right. It should generate wonder and awe at the capacity for what humanity has achieved, even recently. And we have it all at our fingertips, and we can learn it immediately. Yeah. And I think the downside of that is it doesn't take any work to learn it anymore. That's right.
if you want an answer, if you have a question, there's an answer, and you don't have to work for it at all. And that's a problem. So we have encouraged our kids to be readers. And every now and again, when my kids ask a question, I won't let them just go immediately to Alexa and Google. Like, you do a little work here first,
sure,
before you get this answer. And I think that would benefit all of us.
Well, and I think as those sources of information begin to choose through AI or whatever resource they're using, begin to choose for us what we learn, that again, it's the funnel effect. I don't know where objective information comes from so that we can make those decisions on our own.
Okay, but if you're aware of the funnel effect, that means you can operate within it.
That's right.
And
how many are?
Oh, several billion aren't, maybe, is the bigger problem.
Yeah.
And then there's the larger problem of censorship too, at the fundamental government level. Like, in China, at least, Google isn't allowed to show certain things that come up for search queries, right? How is that happening to me now? I don't know.
There was just an announcement this weekend that a phrase has been banned by YouTube.
A phrase?
Yeah. A very popular phrase that came out of a certain NASCAR event a couple of weeks ago.
We're not allowed to talk about that in the Earthwork podcast?
You can't say that word. No. So it's interesting. I don't get into these kinds of things with a lot of people, but I think, you and I probably think a lot more alike than you give us credit.
You guys in Idaho are so bananas, though. You're crazy. I don't know.
Yeah.
You're preparing for the end times always. And I'm not.
I don't even have a gun on me right now, Chuck.
Not on you, no. But
not even within an arm's reach. I don't have one.
So that concerns me, because I don't mind anybody having guns. You guys want your guns, have your guns. I don't generally care about gun control laws, because that isn't working at all. Whatever laws are in the books are clearly, not effective. Right. I don't care about that. I do care about the fact that I don't own guns. So when if there is a civil war in this country at some point between one side of the country versus the others, pretty sure the one side's going to have all the guns, and it's going to be a real short war. That's my fear.
That could
be. But I don't think it's an irrational phobia. But I want to ask you a question, if I'm allowed to do that.
Let's do it. We're kind of wrapping up anyway, so I was going to make sure
I don't get to talk to people like this anymore. So
no, that's good. Question.
Why? See, here I go. I'm looking wistfully over here. I'm doing it to you.
Welcome to Ask Kevin.
Why is it that by tradition, at least in this country, I don't know how it was everywhere else, it was considered the polite thing to do not to talk about politics and religion? That's sort of a precursor to these things you can and can't say on Twitter.
Right.
How are you ever going to come to any understanding if there's certain things you just can't talk about?
Oh, boy. I didn't have that on my list. That's a great question. I don't have an answer to it. I don't know. So
I'm going to say this because I brought it up. I don't generally believe in God the way that I was raised in a Christian church, but I choose to put my faith in people. That's a good place to do that, I think. But if somebody was a fundamentalist Christian and they heard me say I don't believe in God, we would never be able to come to an accommodation on that if we don't talk about it.
Sure.
They would just believe that I'm a heathen and I'm doomed to damnation. And maybe that's true. Maybe it isn't. But we can't talk about it if we don't discuss it, if it's taboo. And I hate the concept of anything being taboo.
Right. Really. No, I agree. I heard a pastor say one time that I've never met an atheist on his deathbed. So I think you work through things in your life, and you just like your health decisions, you work through things and you come to conclusions, and everybody should be allowed to come to their own conclusion. I do believe there is absolute truth in this world, in that, there are just things, whether you look to the Constitution historically, or you look to, the 10 Commandments or what have you, which tend to be related in a lot of ways. But there are things that I think are implanted in our DNA that are truths that can't be violated. But But like you said, if we can't talk about it,
Right.
we can't agree or disagree at that point.
Right. And we can't come to the accommodation of coexisting.
Right.
Because regardless of your political leanings or mine or anyone else's, we all have to live here together.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, despite what we may think, a very small place for
Right.
a very short period of time. And it doesn't stand to reason that we should spend a moment more than we have to arguing.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't make sense. It doesn't seem like a productive use of our time.
Imagine if we could all just agree on that premise. If we just agree on that.
Well, so that was something. So I've been name dropping a little bit on here. That's one of the things that I like about Twitter is you get to know people.
Yeah.
You wouldn't, get to know. But Chris Tritabaugh made the point about learning the difference between being right or needing to be right and needing to get it right. And that was an important lesson for me to learn, because for the bulk of my life, even into my late 30s, even just a few years ago, I needed to be right. And I've given that up. There's very few hills I'm dying on, and most of those hills are related to how my children are raised and how they are going to live their lives while they're under my roof. But that's about it.
Yeah. We use the term in our office, especially for the podcast and some of the things we do and on the marketing side, is don't let great get in the way of good. Right. And there's some relational truth to that too, where we just, we're our own worst enemies in a lot of ways.
Sure.
Interesting.
You trip over a lot of good solutions on your way to perfect.
That's right. And choose to ignore them.
Right.
I didn't do very well on that question. You have any others?
I don't know this. So this is going to be heavily edited, I gather, but have you guys, did somebody really make the Turf Truth people angry from Earthworks to those guys? They have taken dead aim at Earthworks.
Right.
Or their claims about certain things in management of soils. And I'm not going to discuss the claims or the concepts or any of those things, because again, I'm not smart enough to understand it. But man, you want to talk about a group of people that need to be right. They're dead set on needing to be right about this one particular topic and just stepping right over Earthworks on their way to doing it. Yeah. And somebody in the situation is right. Maybe they are objectively with scientific evidence in laboratory settings. I think there's a lot of benefit to the things that Earthworks has done for consumers in the field. I don't know that Turf Truth has drawn up a soil management plan for any one specific client and seen it go to fruition and find success in it. Right. But I believe Earthworks has done that for a lot of people over the years. And without getting any deeper into it, it seems odd to me that they take dead aim at Earthworks. Mm.
I'll give some credit to Dave Wilburn. It's a good question. And it's a valid question. I'll give some credit to Dave on his live stream a couple of weeks ago. And I thought his point was very, very well made. And he spoke to this very subject. But the way he packaged it, I thought it was really good. He said, browbeating golf course superintendents and turf managers like this and singling out a company or a person that's put his career and his mortgage and his livelihood on the line every day for his customers for the last 35 years, it is not productive. But it also robs the Chuck Barbers of the world their ability to think critically on their own golf course for fear of being incorrect because somebody hiding behind a cartoon has said it's incorrect. Whereas you've got anecdotal evidence that the last 10 years of your efforts have improved the playability and the conditions on the golf course. And that position completely erases that or threatens it at least. And that's not fair.
Right. I mean, beyond the fact of the sort of the snide attitude, the fact that they hide behind anonymity is
right.
It's not, maybe they're protecting something
right
that prevents them from owning their opinions.
Yeah.
That's fine if that's the way you want to do it. But I think if you have to go to that length to prove your argument is correct, perhaps it's not a good argument.
Well, and you alluded to it earlier, the face-to-face conversations. If we could have a discussion and a debate, maybe we could establish some common ground that would work for both. And until that happens, we've kind of chosen the route of don't give them any light. Yeah, don't engage. I mean, there's some points that they're absolutely spot on with, but there's others that just aren't fair.
Yeah, common ground between the target and the shooter.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I'm glad you brought it up because it's been something we've kind of tiptoed around for the last few weeks, but it's been pretty pointed, and it's it's hard when a guy like me has been on the practitioner side for so long, and then I've chosen a company that I believe in because it's helped me be successful as a turf manager, and it makes me question whether I'm right or wrong, and I'm not always right. I'm certainly not always right, but I think it brings into question whether you've made the right career path choices and choices in general, and that's not fair to take that away from somebody.
Yeah, and if their tactic is just to browbeat the subject to death, you're not going to find any greater truth in that.
Right. And I think it's a turnoff for a lot of guys that, it's points of interest, but it's a turnoff if you're not going to have a productive conversation about it.
I admit it can be funny to watch when they clip over to the different BS clips, the cutaways.
Well, Chuck, we're up against over our hour, but I knew we would find some rabbit trails that maybe I haven't explored with other guests before. And I thank you for your time. And, we could probably do this for another couple hours if we wanted to, but sure appreciate it. And your insights and your contributions to the industry, I think have been, we found each other, like I said, through TurfNet years ago, and we've kept in touch with each other in different roles. And I think it's great. That's what it's all about.
The people that you've had on this podcast, other than me, have contributed a whole lot more. And I've learned a lot from those people and you and the good people at Earthworks along the way. So I appreciate you having me on.
You bet.
That was like my main question that I had when we started was, well, what am I doing here? Because you have U.S. Open hosts and world famous agronomists and all these other things. Some dork from St. Charles Country Club is now the most recent highlight. So
yeah, but that dork from St. Charles has a different set of experiences than anybody else has in the industry. I think we can pull that out of everybody. I could tell you a story about a guy I met on the plane coming back from Phoenix last week that was absolutely. I still think about it every day, and I will probably never forget that conversation. He was just a dude sitting next to me on an airplane, but. There's always something to be learned and something to be gained. You gave a couple plugs for books and podcasts. If I haven't told you, Land of the Giants is one that I would encourage you to look at. That was given to me by one of my distributor partners out this way, and it's been really interesting. You'll love it.
It's like the Hicks household, Land of the Giants.
Something like that. Yeah, exactly. Chuck, thank you very much. I appreciate you joining me today, and we'll see you soon, hopefully at GIS this year.
I'll see you there.
Okay. Appreciate it. Have a great day.